The afternoon sun streamed through the living room window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, but it did little to lighten the oppressive atmosphere. My daughter, Sarah, stood before me, her face a mask of disbelief and anger. Beside her, my son-in-law, David, clenched his jaw, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape route. I had just finished telling them. I changed my bank details, I stated, my voice steady, though my heart hammered against my ribs. My pension now goes to a new account, one only I control. The silence that followed was thick, heavy, almost suffocating. Sarah's mouth opened and closed, no sound emerging. Her perfectly coiffed blonde hair, usually a testament to her daily salon visits, seemed to wilt slightly. David, who had been pacing moments before, his expensive leather shoes squeaking faintly on the polished hardwood floor, froze mid-stride, his face draining of color. The air in the room, usually filled with the faint scent of Sarah's expensive perfume and David's aftershave, now felt stale, charged with an unspoken tension. "What?" Sarah finally stammered, her voice barely a whisper, a fragile sound that seemed to crack in the stillness. "What did you say, Mom? You can't do that. We depend on that money. We have expenses, debts to pay." Her hands, usually so graceful, now fluttered nervously at her sides. I felt a cold, hard knot form in my stomach. "Debts?" I repeated, my voice laced with a bitterness I hadn't known I possessed, a sharp edge that surprised even me. "Are you referring to David's new Harley-Davidson motorcycle, the one that cost more than my first car, or the luxury cruise you took last month, complete with private balcony and unlimited spa treatments? Or perhaps that enormous 80-inch Samsung QLED TV you bought the week before, the one that dwarfs the entire living room wall?" Each question was a small, precise jab. David took a step forward, his finger pointing at me, accusatory, his face a mask of indignation. "You live in our house, Martha. You eat our food. It's the least you can do to contribute." His words were spat out, loaded with contempt he no longer bothered to hide, his voice rising with each syllable. The veins in his neck stood out, a testament to his barely contained fury. A bitter laugh escaped my lips, a dry, humorless sound that echoed in the suddenly small room. "Our house? How quickly you forget whose name is on the deed, David. This house, which my late husband, Arthur, and I bought with every penny we saved, brick by brick, sacrifice after sacrifice, is my house. You two moved in 3 years ago, remember? After you lost your apartment because you couldn't pay the rent. A fact you conveniently gloss over now, don't you?" I met his gaze, unflinching, a new strength solidifying within me. Sarah let out a choked cry, a sound of genuine distress, as if I had struck her. Her hands flew to her chest, clutching at the silk blouse she wore. "I can't believe you're talking to me like this. I'm your daughter, your only daughter. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us?" Tears welled in her eyes, but they were tears of fury, not sorrow. I knew them well. I had seen them countless times when she didn't get her way. "Everything you've done for me." My words came out colder than I intended, a frosty breath in the heated room. "Tell me, Sarah, what exactly have you done for me?" I crossed my arms, waiting, my gaze steady. She stammered, searching for arguments, her mind visibly scrambling. We give you a roof over your head. We take care of you." Her voice was a desperate plea, laced with a false sense of righteousness. "You take care of me?" I interrupted, feeling decades of suppressed silence break inside me like a burst dam, a torrent of unspoken grievances finally unleashed. "Do you take care of me when you wake me at 6 in the morning to make breakfast? When I have to wash your clothes, iron David's shirts, clean the bathroom, you dirty? Is it taking care of me? Or is it simply exploiting an old woman who was too heartbroken to fight back?" My voice, though still steady, carried an undeniable tremor of long-held pain. David slammed his fist against the wall, making the framed wedding photo that had hung there for 40 years tremble precariously. The glass rattled, a sharp sound in the tense silence. "You are an ungrateful, selfish old woman. Without us, you'd be rotting in some dead-end nursing home." His face was contorted with rage, his words a venomous hiss. His words should have hurt. 6 months ago, they would have shattered me, reduced me to a trembling mess. But today, after everything I had endured, after the humiliations I had swallowed in silence, After the nights spent crying in my room while they laughed in the living room, spending my $2,000 a month on their whims, those words bounced off me without causing a scratch. They were merely the desperate flailing of a cornered animal. "Perhaps you're right," I said, picking up my purse, the worn leather feeling surprisingly comforting in my hand. "Perhaps I am a selfish old woman, but this selfish old woman just got her freedom back." I felt a quiet satisfaction bloom in my chest, a warmth spreading through the cold knot of my stomach. Sarah collapsed onto the sofa, the same sofa I had paid for when theirs broke, its plush cushions sinking under her weight. Her hands trembled as she covered her face, her sobs muffled. "You can't do this to us, Mom. Please. David has medical treatments. We have financial commitments. You're going to ruin us." Her voice was thick with tears, but the underlying tone was still one of entitlement. "I'm going to ruin you?" I repeated slowly, letting each word settle in the thick air of the room, like stones dropped into still water. "Isn't that ironic? For 3 years, you have lived off my pension, every dollar I earned with my sweat and my effort, and now that I decide that money is mine again, I'm the one who's ruining you?" My gaze swept over them, taking in their expensive clothes, their well-fed appearance, a stark contrast to the sacrifices I had made. David approached again, but this time, there was something different in his eyes. It wasn't just rage anymore, it was fear, real fear of losing his source of income, his personal ATM, that had worked for so long without protest. The bravado had begun to crack. "Martha, let's be reasonable," he said, trying to soften his tone, but not quite succeeding. The underlying aggression still simmered beneath the forced calm. "We can reach an agreement. You don't have to be so drastic. We can talk about this, surely." He even managed a weak, placating smile, a pale imitation of the charm that had once fooled me. I looked at this man who had entered my family 7 years ago, with his charming smile and his promises to take care of my daughter. The same man who now saw me only as a source of money, a resource to be exploited until there was nothing left of me. The illusion of his kindness had completely shattered, revealing the cold calculation beneath. "The only agreement we're going to have," I said as I walked toward the stairs leading to my room, my steps firm and unhesitating, "is that from today on, my money is mine alone. And if that bothers you, well, the door is open. You know where it is." I paused at the foot of the stairs, turning to face them one last time, my resolve unwavering. I left them there in the middle of the living room, their mouths agape, their plans crumbling around them like a house of cards. I climbed each step, feeling an enormous weight lift from my shoulders, a physical lightness I hadn't experienced in years. The old wooden stairs creaked beneath my weight, a familiar sound that now felt like a melody of freedom. It had taken me 72 years to learn this lesson, that love can't be bought, that real family doesn't exploit you, and that it is never, ever too late to reclaim your dignity. Behind me, I heard Sarah sobbing, her cries echoing in the suddenly vast space, and David cursing under his breath, a low, guttural sound of impotent rage. But for the first time in 3 years, those sounds no longer broke my heart. They only reminded me why I had made the most important decision of my life that morning, when I walked into the bank and said the words that would change everything. "I want to change my banking information. I need a new card, one that no one else can touch." It all began 3 years ago, at my husband Arthur's funeral. I remember the oppressive scent of lilies mixed with the comforting aroma of coffee the neighbors had prepared for the guests, a strange blend of grief and domesticity. I remember Sarah's hands squeezing mine, her touch a fleeting comfort, as I watched the coffin descend into the earth, taking with it 40 years of my life, of shared laughter, of quiet breakfasts, of silly arguments and sweet reconciliations. Arthur died of a massive heart attack on a Tuesday morning. He was tending to the rose bushes he loved so much, his hands calloused from years of gardening, when he simply collapsed. By the time the ambulance arrived, its sirens wailing a mournful song down our quiet street, it was too late. The doctor, a kind man with tired eyes, told me he didn't suffer, that it was instantaneous. But I suffered. God, how I suffered. The world had gone from vibrant color to muted gray in an instant. The first few months in that empty house were a silent hell. Every corner screamed his absence, his coffee mug, still in the cabinet where he always kept it, his worn slippers by the bed, his toothbrush, which I didn't have the courage to throw away until 6 months later, its bristles still holding the faint scent of his toothpaste. I would wake up in the pre-dawn hours, the house creaking around me, expecting to find him in the kitchen reading the newspaper, the soft rustle of pages a familiar comfort, and reality would hit me every time, as if it were the first, a fresh wave of grief washing over me. The silence was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest. Sarah came to visit me often at first. Her visits were a whirlwind of activity, a stark contrast to my quiet despair. "Mom, you can't be alone," she'd say, her voice full of what seemed like genuine concern, though now I see it was laced with a subtle agenda. "You need family around you." David, ever the charmer, would agree, putting an arm around my shoulder, his touch feeling warm but somehow insincere. "We'll take care of you, Martha. You're not alone." His words were smooth, reassuring, exactly what a grieving widow wanted to hear. Their apartment, they explained, was getting too expensive. David had lost his job in sales, a vague story about restructuring that I didn't question at the time, and Sarah's part-time work at the boutique wasn't enough to cover their extravagant lifestyle. They suggested, very gently at first, that they could move in with me. "Just until we get back on our feet, Mom," Sarah had pleaded, her eyes wide and innocent, her voice soft and persuasive. "It would be so good for you to have us here. We can help with the house, keep you company." She painted a picture of domestic bliss, of shared meals and laughter, of a house once again full of life. I was vulnerable, drowning in grief, my judgment clouded by sorrow. The thought of not being alone, of having my daughter and her husband fill the echoing silence of the house, was a lifeline, a beacon in the darkness. I agreed. It felt like the right thing to do, the family thing, and at first it was. Sarah cooked occasionally, though her culinary skills were limited to takeout menus. David fixed a leaky faucet, a small act that felt monumental at the time. They brought laughter back into the house, even if it was sometimes a little too loud, a little too boisterous for my still fragile nerves, a jarring contrast to the quiet memories of Arthur. But slowly, subtly, things began to shift. The help with the house became me doing all the chores, my hands aching from scrubbing floors and washing dishes. My meals were cooked for them, not with them, their preferences dictating the menu, their laundry piled up in the utility room, waiting for my attention, a mountain of clothes that seemed to grow exponentially. My pension, a modest but steady $2,000 a month, became household funds. David, with his knack for numbers, offered to manage it. "It's easier, Martha," he'd said, flashing his charming smile, his eyes glinting with a predatory gleam I now recognize. "One account for everything. No need for you to worry about bills. We'll take care of it all." I saw the bank statements, of course. At first I just glanced at them, my mind still too foggy with grief to truly process the numbers. Then I started to notice things. Dinners out at expensive restaurants, the kind Arthur and I only went to for anniversaries. New gadgets, shiny and unnecessary. Designer clothes for Sarah, bags and shoes that cost more than my entire monthly grocery bill. My pension, meant to support my retirement, was disappearing faster than I could comprehend, a steady stream flowing into a bottomless pit. When I tried to ask about it, Sarah would wave her hand dismissively, her tone impatient. "Oh, Mom, don't be silly. Those are just our contributions to the house. We're paying for everything, remember? You don't need to worry your pretty little head about it." But they weren't. They were paying for their everything with my money. My old friends stopped calling. Sarah would tell them I was resting or not feeling up to it, effectively isolating me, cutting off my lifelines to the outside world. I became increasingly isolated, a ghost in my own home, serving my daughter and son-in-law, watching my savings dwindle, my future security eroding with each passing month. I was too ashamed to tell anyone, too heartbroken to confront them. Arthur would have been furious. He would have never allowed this. He would have seen through their charade in an instant. But Arthur was gone, and I was alone, or so I thought. One evening, the scent of stale beer and cheap cologne hanging heavy in the air, I overheard David on the phone. He was talking about a new investment, a sure thing, that required a large sum. His voice was hushed, conspiratorial. "Don't worry," he chuckled into the phone, a chilling sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Martha's pension comes in next week. We'll have it then." My blood ran cold. He was planning to use my entire monthly pension for his gamble, a reckless venture that could easily wipe out my last remaining security. My pension, the money I had worked 40 years for, the only security I had left. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the shadows dancing in the moonlight, tears silently tracing paths down my temples, soaking my pillow. The words echoed in my mind. Martha, you're strong. Don't ever let anyone take advantage of your kindness. Arthur's voice, clear as a bell, cut through the fog of my grief. He had always seen the steel beneath my gentle exterior, a steel I had forgotten I possessed. But that night, the steel began to re-emerge, hardening my resolve, sharpening my focus. The next morning, I made a decision. A quiet, firm decision that felt like a turning point. I dressed carefully, choosing my most sensible walking shoes, the ones Arthur had bought me for our hiking trips. I took my old, worn purse, its familiar weight a comfort in my trembling hands. I didn't tell Sarah or David where I was going. They were still asleep, probably dreaming of their next luxury purchase, oblivious to the seismic shift that was about to occur. I walked to the local bank, the same one Arthur and I had used for decades, its familiar brick facade a symbol of stability. The teller, a kind young woman named Maria, greeted me warmly, her smile genuine. "Good morning, Mrs. Henderson. How can I help you today?" "Good morning, Maria," I replied, my voice surprisingly steady, a newfound confidence ringing in my tone. "I need to open a new account, a private account, and I want to redirect my pension deposits there, starting immediately." I met her gaze, my resolve unwavering. Maria's eyebrows raised slightly, a flicker of surprise in her eyes, but she simply nodded and began the process, her fingers flying across the keyboard. As I signed the papers, filled out the forms, and received my new card, a sense of liberation washed over me, a feeling of lightness that had been absent for so long. It wasn't just about the money, it was about reclaiming myself. It was about drawing a line in the sand, a boundary I should have set years ago. The plastic card in my hand felt like a key, unlocking a cage I hadn't realized I was in. I walked home with a lighter step, a feeling of quiet triumph swelling in my chest, a small, defiant smile playing on my lips. The morning air felt crisper, the birdsong sweeter. I knew the confrontation was coming. My pension was due to be deposited that very morning, and David, with his meticulous tracking of my money, would soon realize it hadn't arrived in the joint account. He would go to the ATM, expecting to withdraw the funds he had been spending for 3 years without remorse. But this time, nothing would come out. This time, the machine would tell him there were no available funds. The thought brought a grim satisfaction. I didn't have to wait long. 20 minutes later, I heard the car arrive with a screech of tires, a harsh sound that shattered the morning's peace. The front door opened with such force that it hit the wall, rattling the plaster. David's footsteps pounded up the stairs like a stampede, heavy and frantic. "Sarah, Sarah, wake up." His voice was laden with panic and fury, a raw, unbridled sound. I heard Sarah groan, still drowsy, her voice slurred with sleep. "What's wrong? What time is it?" Her voice sounded irritated, confused, as if her pleasant dreams had been rudely interrupted. "The card doesn't work. There's no money in the account. Nothing. The ATM gave me an insufficient funds message. I tried 3 times and nothing. What the hell is going on?" David was shouting now, his voice rising an octave with each word, his desperation palpable. There was a silence, then hurried footsteps. Sarah must have been checking her phone, logging into the bank app, her fingers fumbling with the screen. "It can't be," I heard her mutter, a note of disbelief in her voice. "It has to be a mistake. Mom's pension always arrives on the 1st of the month. Always. Well, it didn't arrive today, and our account is in the red. I have payments to make today. I promised Ivan money. What am I going to tell him?" David sounded desperate now, his mask of control completely disintegrated, revealing the frightened, entitled man beneath. The mention of Ivan hinted at another layer of their financial recklessness. "I'll call the bank," Sarah said, and I could hear the fear in her voice, a genuine tremor that had nothing to do with manipulation. Fear that her source of income had dried up. Fear of having to face the consequences of 3 years of uncontrolled spending. I walked down the stairs slowly, holding onto the railing, the polished wood cool beneath my fingertips. Each step was deliberate, measured, a silent declaration of my newfound resolve. When I reached the bottom, Sarah was on the phone, still in her pajamas, with her hair disheveled and her face pale, her eyes wide with alarm. David was pacing back and forth like a caged animal, running a hand through his already messy hair, cursing under his breath, his movements jerky and agitated. Sarah saw me, and her eyes locked on me with an intensity that would have been terrifying at another time. "The bank says there's no mistake," she said slowly, lowering the phone, her voice barely audible. "It says the account is active, but it hasn't received any deposits this month." Her gaze was a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. "That's impossible," David exploded, his voice booming through the house. "Martha's pension always arrives on the 1st. Always." He turned to me with bloodshot eyes, his face contorted with suspicion. "What did you do, old woman? Did you talk to someone? Was there a problem with your pension?" He took a threatening step towards me, his fists clenched. I took a deep breath, feeling all the fear, all the anxiety of the last few days turn into a strange, cold calm. The air in the room seemed to thicken, heavy with their unspoken accusations. "There was no problem with my pension," I said in a clear, firm voice, my gaze unwavering. "In fact, it arrived right on time this morning." The silence that followed was absolute, deafening. I could hear the ticking of the clock in the living room, a rhythmic pulse in the stillness, the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the steady beat of my own heart, strong and resolute. "What?" Sarah was the first to speak, her voice barely a whisper, a fragile sound that seemed to shatter the silence. "What do you mean, it arrived?" "I mean exactly that," I replied, maintaining my upright posture, even though my knees were trembling slightly beneath my sensible skirt. "My pension arrived this morning. My $2,000 are safe in my account. My new account. An account that only I control." I held her gaze, letting the words sink in. David took a step toward me, his fists clenched, his face a mask of disbelief and betrayal. "What did you do?" His voice was a low, dangerous growl, a primal sound of a man losing control. "You changed the account? When? Why?" "A week ago," I said, and there was something liberating in finally telling the truth, in shedding the burden of their expectations. "I went to the bank, opened a new account, and changed the information so my pension would be deposited there, where no one else can touch it." I watched their faces, seeing the dawning realization, the slow comprehension of what I had done. Sarah brought her hands to her mouth, a gasp escaping her lips. Tears began to roll down her cheeks, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage and panic, of a spoiled child denied her toy. "Mom, you can't do that. That money, we depend on that money. How are we going to pay the bills? How are we going to eat?" Her voice rose to a frantic pitch. I looked her in the eyes, my daughter, the child I had held in my arms, whom I had comforted during nightmares, whom I had applauded at every achievement. The child I had loved unconditionally, who had repaid that love with exploitation. The same way I had to manage for 40 years before I retired, I said in a firm voice, my tone unwavering. "By working." "By working," David exploded, his face turning a mottled red. "You are selfish, an ungrateful old woman. You lived under our roof. You ate our food. We gave you everything." He came so close I could see the veins throbbing in his neck, smell the stale scent of his morning breath. His anger was a palpable heat radiating off him. "Your roof," I repeated, and now my voice rose too, matching his intensity, a fire igniting within me. "Your roof, David. This house has written my name on the deed. This house that Arthur and I bought 45 years ago, with our dreams and our hard work. You came to live here because you had nowhere else to go, and instead of thanking me, you turned me into your maid and your ATM, a convenient resource to be drained dry." I pulled the stack of papers from my purse that I had saved, the bank statements I had printed at the bank, each page a testament to their deceit. I dropped them on the dining room table with a dull thud, the sound echoing in the tense silence. "You want to talk about numbers? Let's talk. In 3 years, you have spent $65,000 of my pension, $65,000 that I earned with my sweat, with my blood, with my ruined health, working tirelessly to secure my future." Sarah approached the papers with trembling hands, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and denial. Her eyes scanned the pages, and I saw her face go from red with anger to stark white with shock. Mom, you. Her voice trailed off, unable to form a coherent sentence. What? I interrupted, my voice sharp, cutting through her stammering. Did you think I would never find out? Or did you think I was too stupid, too old, too broken by Arthur's death to defend myself? My voice cracked slightly on my husband's name, a brief flicker of the old pain, but I recovered quickly, my resolve hardening. Did you think you could just keep squeezing me until there was nothing left of me, until I was a hollow shell? David snatched the papers from Sarah's hands, his movements jerky and aggressive, and began to leaf through them frantically. I saw his eyes move from left to right, recognizing every charge, every excessive expense, every luxury they had allowed themselves with my money. His face went through a series of expressions: surprise, a fleeting moment of shame for a brief second, and then pure, unadulterated rage, a dangerous fire in his eyes. "This doesn't prove anything," he said finally, though his voice had lost its conviction, a desperate attempt to regain control. "These are normal household expenses: food, utilities, maintenance." But we both knew he was lying. The numbers didn't lie. The cold, hard facts were laid bare. Normal expenses? I took the papers back, my fingers brushing against his, and pointed to a specific line, my voice unwavering. $1,200 at Tiffany & Co. Is that a normal expense, David? Or this $2,000 at a 5-star resort in the Caribbean, complete with private butler service? Or the $400 a week you spent on your gambling app, the one you thought I didn't know about? I watched his face, seeing the color drain from it, the mask of indignation crumbling. His face contorted, a vein throbbing in his temple. "That's none of your business," he spat, his voice laced with venom. "It is my business when it's my money," I retorted, my voice ringing with a newfound authority, a power I hadn't known I possessed. "It's my business when you've been systematically stealing from me, from your own mother-in-law, from the woman who gave you a home when you had none. It's my business when you've treated me like a disposable resource, a means to your selfish ends." Sarah burst into fresh sobs, her body shaking with the force of her cries. "Mom, please, we'll pay you back. We promise. Just put the money back in the old account. We'll change, we swear." Her words were desperate, but still lacked the ring of true remorse. "There is no old account for my pension anymore," I said, my voice firm, leaving no room for negotiation. "And there will be no paying me back. What's done is done. But from now on, my money is mine, and if you can't live with that, then you can't live here." I looked from Sarah to David, my gaze holding steady. David's eyes narrowed, a dangerous glint in their depths. "Are you kicking us out, old woman?" His voice was low, menacing, a thinly veiled threat. "I am giving you a choice," I corrected him, my voice calm but resolute. "You can stay, but you will contribute to the household expenses. Truly contribute, not just with empty promises. You will find jobs, pay for your own food, and you will respect me in my own home, or you can leave. The choice is yours." I folded my arms, waiting for their decision. The ball was now in their court. They stood there, stunned, their faces a mixture of disbelief and outrage. The idea that I, Martha Henderson, the quiet, grieving widow, would dare to stand up to them, to issue an ultimatum, was clearly unfathomable. Sarah was still crying, her face blotchy and red, but David's face had hardened into a mask of resentment, his jaw clenched tight. "Fine," David said, his voice low and dangerous, a simmering threat beneath the surface. "Fine, Martha. We'll leave. You want to be alone? Be alone. See how you like it then." He grabbed Sarah's arm, his grip tight, pulling her towards the door. "Come on, Sarah. We don't need this. We don't need her." Sarah pulled away, her eyes still on me, a flicker of something unreadable in their depths. "Mom, please." Her voice was a desperate plea, but it was too late. "No, Sarah," I said, shaking my head, my resolve unyielding. "This is what happens when you let people take advantage of you. This is the consequence of your choices, not mine. The words felt like a cold, hard truth, a necessary severing. They left that day. I watched them pack their bags, the silence in the house broken only by the angry thuds of their belongings being thrown into suitcases, the slamming of drawers, the muttered curses. Sarah didn't look back, her face averted, her shoulders hunched. David gave me a look of pure hatred, a venomous glare that promised no forgiveness, before slamming the door behind them with a resounding crash that echoed through the now empty house. The house felt eerily quiet again, but this time, it wasn't the suffocating silence of grief, the heavy blanket of sorrow that had once enveloped me. It was the peaceful quiet of freedom, a lightness that permeated every room. I walked through the rooms, touching the furniture, looking at the photographs of Arthur and me, each one a cherished memory. This was my home again, my sanctuary, my own space, reclaimed. The first few weeks were strange. I found myself instinctively reaching for the laundry basket, only to remember there was no one else's clothes to wash. I'd start to prepare a large meal, then realize it was just me, and scale back the portions. There were moments of loneliness. Yes, moments when I missed the noise, even the arguments, the chaotic energy they brought. But then I would remember the endless demands, the disrespect, the constant drain on my resources, the gnawing anxiety, and the feeling of peace would return, a gentle balm to my soul. The quiet was no longer a void, but a canvas for my own thoughts and desires. I started to rediscover myself, peeling back the layers of grief and resentment. I joined a local art class, something Arthur had always encouraged, but I never had time for, always putting others first. I started painting watercolors, imperfect but vibrant, each stroke a small act of defiance and self-expression. I reconnected with old friends, Brenda and Carol, who were thrilled to hear from me, their voices warm and familiar. They listened with open mouths as I recounted the past 3 years, offering comfort and validation, their outrage echoing my own. "You were so brave, Martha," Brenda said, squeezing my hand across the cafe table, her eyes filled with admiration. "I don't know if I could have done it." "It wasn't bravery at first," I confessed, stirring my tea, the steam rising in a comforting swirl. "It was desperation. But then, it became about self-respect, about reclaiming what was mine." Life wasn't perfect. There were still days when I worried about Sarah, wondered if she was okay, if she regretted her choices, if she was truly learning from her mistakes. I didn't know where they had gone, and I didn't try to find out. I knew I needed this space, this time to heal, to rebuild. I learned to live with that uncertainty, to accept that some things were beyond my control. Some days were harder than others. I would see mothers and daughters walking together in the park, their laughter echoing, and feel a pang of pain, a longing for what I had lost. I would hear Brenda talking on the phone with her children, planning family dinners, and wonder if I would ever have those conversations with Sarah again. But then I would look around my house, truly mine now, filled with things I had chosen, things that brought me joy. I looked at my bank account with its growing balance, a tangible symbol of my regained independence. I looked at the watercolor paintings I had created, imperfect but made with love, each one a testament to my resilience, and I knew I had made the right decision. The path to healing was long, but I was finally on it. One spring afternoon, while I was watering Arthur's roses, their velvety petals unfurling in the warm sun, I heard someone knock on the door. It was a hesitant, almost timid knock, unlike David's usual aggressive pounding. When I opened it, I found Sarah standing on the step. She looked different, thinner, with deep, dark circles under her eyes, without the perfect makeup she always wore. Her usually immaculate blonde hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her clothes were simple, worn, a stark contrast to the designer outfits she used to flaunt. "Hi, Mom," she said in a trembling voice, her gaze uncertain. "Sarah." My voice came out colder than I intended, but it was an automatic defense mechanism, a shield I had learned to raise. My heart, however, gave a small, unexpected lurch. Can I come in? I just want to talk, I promise I didn't come to ask for anything." Her eyes were filled with genuine tears, so different from the manipulative tears I had seen before. These were raw, honest, born of pain. Charne. I hesitated for a long moment, every instinct screaming at me to be cautious, to protect myself. But something in her eyes, a flicker of true remorse, made me step aside. I let her in, the familiar scent of her perfume, now fainter, filling the entryway. We sat in the living room, on the same sofa, but with a considerable space between us, a physical manifestation of the emotional distance that had grown. David and I separated, Sarah began, looking at her hands, twisting a small ring on her finger. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper. 2 months ago, it turned out he had more debts than I knew about. Gambling debts, hidden from me. We lost the apartment we rented. I'm living with a friend now. I got a second job, waiting tables at a diner. I'm trying to pay off everything we owe, trying to dig myself out of the hole. Her voice cracked with emotion. I waited in silence, offering no solutions, not trying to fix her problems, a difficult task for a mother. The old Martha would have immediately offered help, but the new Martha knew better. I didn't come to ask you for money, she continued, her voice gaining a little strength, though still laced with pain. I came to tell you that you were right about everything. I used you. I treated you horribly. I took advantage of your grief over Dad's death and turned you into something you weren't. I took away your dignity, your peace, your security. The tears were flowing freely now, tracing paths down her pale cheeks. And I'm sorry. God, Mom, I'm so sorry. I truly am. Why now? I asked softly, my voice still guarded, but a little of the coldness had melted. Why are you coming to tell me this now? Because I hit rock bottom, she admitted, finally looking up, her red, swollen eyes meeting mine. Because I lost everything. Because I finally understood what I did to you when someone did the same thing to me. Her gaze was raw, vulnerable. David left me with nothing, Mom, exactly like I left you. And when I felt used, discarded, invisible, when I realized I had no one to turn to, I finally understood. The pain, the betrayal, it was a mirror. We sat in silence for a long moment, the only sound Sarah's soft sniffles. Part of me, the old, maternal part, wanted to hug her, to forgive her immediately, to be her protective mother again, to wipe away her tears. But the wiser part, the one that had fought so hard to emerge, the steel Arthur had always seen, knew that true forgiveness required more than words. It required time, and consistent, genuine change. I appreciate your apology, I said finally, my voice gentle but firm. I really do. It means a lot to hear it. But apologies are just the beginning. Sarah, I need to see real change. I need time to heal from the hurt you caused. I need to know that you won't go back to seeing me as a solution to your problems, as a resource to be exploited. I understand. She nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. I don't expect you to forgive me today. I just wanted you to know that I finally get it, and that I'm going to work on being better, not for you, but for me, for my own self-respect. We talked for 2 hours that day. It was painful, honest, raw. I told her how I had felt during those 3 years, the loneliness, the fear, the humiliation. She told me about her own fears and weaknesses that had led her to justify her actions, her own struggles with self-worth and entitlement. We didn't end up as best friends. We didn't hug and promise that everything was fixed, that the past was forgotten, but it was a start, a fragile, tentative beginning. When she left, the house felt quiet again, but this time, it was a different kind of quiet. Not the heavy silence of grief, nor the peaceful quiet of freedom, but a thoughtful, hopeful quiet. I sat on my porch again, holding my now cold coffee, watching the world go by. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and pink, casting long shadows across the lawn. Arthur's roses swayed gently in the breeze, their fragrance sweet and comforting. I didn't know if Sarah and I would ever get back what we had lost. I didn't know if she would really change or if this was just another temporary pattern, another desperate plea. But I did know one thing for certain. I had changed. I had found my voice, my value, my right to exist as more than just a means to others' ends. It had taken me 72 years to learn that self-love is not selfishness. That setting boundaries is not cruelty. That saying no when necessary is an act of survival, not meanness. I looked at my reflection in the window, the glass reflecting the fading light. I saw a woman with honestly earned wrinkles around her eyes, each one a story. With gray hair, she no longer died to please others, but wore with pride, with eyes that had cried rivers of tears, but that now shone with something new, something resilient, freedom. Arthur, I whispered to the wind, A soft breath carried on the evening air. I finally did it. I finally stood up for myself. And somewhere in my most precious memories, in the quiet corners of my heart, I could hear his voice telling me what he had always said. His words a gentle caress. "I'm proud of you, my love." I went into my house, my home, closed the door behind me, and smiled, because today, I didn't need anyone's permission to live. Today, I didn't have to apologize for existing. Today, I was simply Martha, and that was more than enough. This story is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to real people, events, or places is purely coincidental.